Anyway, so let's do these chapters, and then I'll demonstrate the next couple of projects I just got up, which are good, clean fun. So what is dynamic analysis? So in order to do dynamic analysis, the simplest case, you run the malware in a virtual machine, let it get infected, let it get registry keys and files created on it. And since you're going to be infecting your machine, it's probably not going to be easy to clean it, so you should use a virtual machine that you can throw away, or use the commercial version of VMware that lets you set a snapshot and revert to the snapshot, because in general, if you run malware removal tools, those are for amateurs. You don't really want to do that in a professional level. You never really know it's gone. So you make a clean state machine and save it, then you infect it with malware and analyze it, then you roll it back to the clean state. Now in our case, we can just keep using the same machine and let the malware pile up, because all our malware is relatively harmless. But when you're studying real machines, you have to be careful. And you know, the safest thing would be to air gap your machines. So you'd have a separate piece of hardware not connected to a network, or you could have a virtual machine and disable all the networking, like remove the network adapter. Then it would be really hard for it to infect the host, although it's still possible, especially this year because of shell shock and meltdown. There are known exploits that crawl out of the virtual machine onto the host. So if your malware is modern and really nasty, it might do that, but most samples are not that clever. And so a real machine, of course, can be much more secure. But you're going to re-imaging a machine all the time takes a little more time, although actually re-imaging a machine is not that hard these days if you have a deployment server, which would be the way to do it, have an image server. And of course, it's going to be more accurate because it's actually very easy to detect that you're in a virtual machine. All you have to do is look at the name of the network adapter and a few registry keys. Lots of them just say VMware network adapter, VMware networking. They aren't hiding it or anything. So if you want to write a script to see am I in a VM, it's easy enough to do. And some malware will do that and then do something different when it's in a virtual machine. However, these days almost all servers are virtual, so you probably do want to infect and take over virtual machines. But you probably don't want to take over machines that are running in VMware Workstation on a desktop, because this is why I'm trying to get away from it. It's of no commercial value in the real world. ESXi is, and enterprise class virtualization is, but these desktop things are used only by amateurs, training people, and perhaps malware analysts. So it probably would be good to detect if you're in VirtualBox or VMware and Fusion or Workstation and not run in those cases, or put up something different to confuse those people. So the virtual machines are what most people do just because it's easy and it's usually good enough. VMware Player is free, but it doesn't let you take snapshots. If that bothers you, you could still just save a copy of a clean machine and then copy the folder, infect it, and throw it away, but it's a few more steps. And there's plenty of other products like VirtualBox and Hyper-V that do the same thing. One thing to know, by the way, is if you want to run Hyper-V on Windows, you have to have the very latest hardware, and you have to make certain settings in the hardware. And once you run Hyper-V on Windows, you cannot run VMware in that box anymore. It conflicts. So you have to remove one to run the other, which is kind of rude. And by the way, the same thing is more or less true of the Mac. I think it seems to be better in the latest version of the Mac OS, but for a while I had trouble when I tried to run VirtualBox and VMware Fusion on the same Mac. There is some local resource, sort of like interrupts, that there's only 4 of, and one of them hogs up too many, so you have to keep running a script to make this one let go to run the other. Although lately I don't have that problem so much, so maybe one of the other product updated and fixed it. The malware here was designed for Windows XP, but I'm not going to teach a class on Windows XP. That's pretty horrible. So we're using Server 2008, which is still pretty old. So probably I'm trying to update my stuff pretty soon, and next time I teach this class, I'm going to try to have everything on Server 2016. But at least we're not using something that's past its end of life, although I think Server 2008 is going to have its end of life pretty soon. So you can disable networking by disconnecting the virtual adapter. You can also have host-only networking. So it talks only to the host but not to the internet, so your machines can talk to each other. That's another option if you like. That's the way Microsoft teaches all their classes, because they don't want you to have viruses on your machine. So they do host-only networking, so your domain controller can talk to the member server, you can practice things, but you're not really going directly on the internet. And that's a pretty good answer, because then if you need to download and put some file in here like a patch, you could download it on your host and then copy it into the VM without the VM ever directly connecting. And that's considered a good practice, because then your host machine runs antivirus, so it'll detect if it's evil, but you don't have to burden your virtual machine running antivirus. So that's one reasonable alternative. All right, NAT mode is the one I prefer. This way the machines can get to the network, but they're connected to the internet through a virtual router, so you are not directly connected to anybody in your LAN. So if you're working in a coffee house, you're not on the same network as other people in there. I've occasionally run attacks and accidentally hit other people in coffee houses, so NAT mode helps protect that. The one thing about being connected to the real internet is if you get infected with malware and it is a botnet malware, you really will connect to the command and control center. You really will be used by the criminal to some extent to commit some degree of crime. You will appear on a list of known infected machines, which is why some people think this is very sloppy and you should not do that. A lot of people do, in fact, do it this way. American companies generally just do it this way because it's fast and convenient, and what's one more bot in the world? In my experience, the German companies are the ones that are horrified by that and say this is wrong. You shouldn't allow your machine to participate in the evil network and let yourself be on a blacklist. That's humiliating. But yeah.
This is being recorded again, right?
I'm sorry, glad you reminded me. This is being recorded, but also it's not being streamed. And I would have provided this earlier, but I forgot. The streaming at City College broke, and I was planning to stream it through Zoom, but I forgot to launch it. So the people missed the first few minutes, but they'll have it now. All right. So hopefully people will eventually notice that the Zoom stream is available, even though the City College streaming is down. They only missed about 10 minutes. Anyway. Good. I'm glad you said that. That reminded me. I intended to do the Zoom screen.
And they're still doing a big recording that'll show up.
They are doing a recording, yes. They'll make a good recording, but their streaming system is broken.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you for reminding me. Oh, good. Here come some people. Good. Yeah, so there is a Zoom stream available, but not a City College stream. Now I have to get rid of this thing, which is hard to do. Escape. Click. Must be some way to get this thing to stop being on my screen. All right. That's the problem with Zoom. It keeps putting junk on my screen. All right, so, like I say, malware might notice you're in a VM, and it might in principle spread to other machines, but that's not very likely. So, assuming you have decided to accept those risks, we can talk about how you do dynamic analysis. The static analysis we've done before, looking at things like strings and library function used and such, gives you a general idea what it does, but you might not be able to see anything useful because of obfuscation or packing, or because they just did something that you can't figure out with those simple tools. So dynamic analysis is the next step. You always start with simple static analysis to give you some clue what you're dealing with. And so you can use an automated software that will just do it all for you. These things are expensive, but they're effective. There are some open source ones too. This is what products like Lastline and FireEye do on your network. Every email attachment is grabbed by them, run in a virtual machine automatically, and they decide whether it's bad based on its behavior in the virtual machine. So there are a bunch of these out there. Cuckoo is one of the free ones. And they give you a nice PDF report of analysis. Just like the malware analysis, the exploit development class I mentioned, we are learning to do something manually, which has begun to be done automatically also. And that's the natural development of things. So if you want to run your malware, if it is an exe file, you can just run it. If it is a library, it cannot run directly. It has to be attached to an exe. So there's a file called rundill32.exe you can use to launch a dill. That's one way to do it. All right. And there's rip.dill. Here's an example that has certain exports, and you can use this rundill command to run it and then run certain functions in that dill. So a way to launch them one by one to see what they do. In the unusual case that you're trying to test a dill without testing the exe that goes along with it. I'm not quite sure what would provoke that, but it is possible to analyze them independently. Normally you get the whole package, whatever is coming from an email attachment, and you run it all together. All right, so Process Monitor is one of the best tools here. This is a view into the Windows event log. It lets you see everything that is done on the machine, and it makes it easy to sort it into files created, registry keys created, and so on. The event log is huge. Microsoft records thousands of events per second, so if you just turn this on and let it run for half an hour, it'll use up all your RAM and crash the machine. So you have to be a little bit careful. Same thing's true of Wireshark. If you just run it for like a day, monitor your network traffic, it'll just fill up all the RAM and crash the machine. That's not what it's intended for. But it is useful as long as you're not crazy. So here's calc.exe, 128,000 of 253,000 events recorded just to launch calc.exe. That's the thing. The Windows event log has many, many, many events. Far too many to hunt through. Notice how it tells you the name of the process here, the process ID, and then things like registry open key, close file, read file, and so on. All these little things happen when you launch a program, and you can ignore them based on any of these. And in order to do simple malware analysis like we're going to do, You just ignore them based on process names. So we ignore everything that's called explorer.exe, ignore everything that's called calc.exe, and that's a quick, sloppy way to clean the screen so we can focus on what the malware did. It would also be very easy for an intelligent malware writer to avoid that, but for simple cases, they won't. So you got a toolbar here. You can start and stop capture with a magnifying glass for some unknown reason. You can erase things here, filter things there, and over there you've got a variety of filters for common cases. But what we're doing is excluding them one by process name. And you'll find if you use the machine I gave you, it's got a whole bunch of things already ignored to make it easy to do the first project. Otherwise, you spend a while ignoring them one by one. You have to ignore about 30 processes. All right, Process Explorer is the replacement for an upgrade for Task Manager. Task Manager is the default Windows tool to see what's running on your machine, and Process Explorer is the sysinternals tool that gives you much more information about what's happening on the machine. Lets you see all these SVC host entries, for example, which is one of the baffling things about Task Manager. There's like a dozen SVC hosts running, and I don't know why. Here you can find out why, which services each one of them is running, and we'll do that later. My thing is not moving for some reason. Hey, my machine seems to be dead. All right, services are pink, processes are blue, new things flash green when they're new, and terminated things appear in red as they vanish. We'll have fun with that a little later. And you can view the DILs. So you can view lower pane view DILs, and then it will show you the libraries that this thing is using. And this is not looking at the headers of the file like Process Monitor. It's looking at the actual usage by that running program. And then you've got properties, which show you a lot about the file. They show you whether it has the defenses, the data execution prevention, and address space layout randomization, about which we're having much more in the exploit development class. Once you have these defenses, you then have to work hard to get past them. And you can also verify the disk file's Windows signature. And you can look at strings, and you can look at the strings of the image on the hard drive or the image in memory. Now, normally they are identical. When you launch a program, normally it takes the exe file and copies it into RAM and runs it in RAM, and it's the same as the exe file. But that is not necessarily true, and we're going to see some samples where that is not true, and that's called process replacement. Like I said, the most common way to run malware on a Windows machine is to add a malicious library to a running file, which it allows. But another way is to just rip out the code of a running process and put in malicious code, and it will continue to run with the privileges. It's sort of amazing you can do this, but you can. All right. So if you want to find a malicious document, you could open it and then see if it launches a process. You know, PDF should really just launch something like Adobe PDF Reader, but nothing else. If it launches some other process, then you could see here and get some clue, look at the strings of that other process and begin to get a clue if it's doing malicious things it shouldn't be doing. There's another tool, registry. RegShot is a tool. You can take a shot of the registry, which will just save the whole registry. Then you can run the malware and take another shot, and then it will take a difference. Sort of like the event log, this tends to give you too many differences and be annoying to hunt through, but still, it is one way to find out what registry keys have been changed. And if you want to, if you do not want to let your malware connect over the real internet to the real command and control servers, you can fake the internet. Now, the textbook uses this product called a PATI DNS. I was unable to make this work on any system. I don't understand what's going on. Maybe it's out of date, but I gave up on it. I tried a lot, so I couldn't. It was amazing. Even on old systems, it won't work. Now, if you're on, you could just run NCAT or netcat on Linux and listen on a port, and then at least it'll do the TCP handshake. But what's really cool is to just use INET-SCIM. And INET-SIM is coming up. INET-SIM is a Linux product included in Kali that simulates the whole internet. It doesn't simulate it very well. It listens on all the common ports for common services, and it will give you like a header. If you load a web page, it'll just load a sample web page. It has penny-speed FTP server and SSH server. It isn't really any of those things, but it'll let you at least complete the handshake and see the banner. So it will hopefully fool your malware long enough that you can get some network traffic to analyze. And this is what you would do if you really don't want to just let the malware phone home. And following TCP stream and Wireshark is the best way to usually analyze most things. It lets you see the layer 7 data, the data that was sent to the server and the data that came back from the server with all the addresses removed and all the packets gathered into one stream again, so it's easy to see what's going on. And here you can see I sent a GET to the server sent a response, 200 OK, then it sent me a ping image, and here's the readable part of a ping binary image. So it's pretty easy to see what's going on, and you can even use that interface to save the results. All right, so I mentioned INET-SIM, just runs on Linux. And you can now, it's now going to listen on that IP address for everything. And so it'll load this page for every website you go to. Fred.com will be that page, and so is every other page. And it'll fool Nmap. If you run Nmap, it'll find all sorts of open ports. Every popular service appears to be running. You know, this is what you want. Hopefully your malware will be fooled too. Whatever it's trying to phone home to, it'll believe it's there. All right. So procmon is what you typically do. First, you have to filter everything that's happening before you run the malware. Then you run Process Explorer. You might run Redshot or INET-SIM, and then Wireshark typically to catch all the network traffic in a way you can analyze it and save it. Then you run your malware. And if you're going to use INET-SIM, you have to have two virtual machines, your Windows target and your Linux simulating it, and you have to set this to be your gateway. So all traffic goes over there. All right, so I got a few cahoots about that, and then I'm going to demonstrate some of that stuff. We got a few new projects, and they're good, clean fun. So, which tool lets you analyze botnet malware without connecting to a real command and control server? So that is INET-SIM, just what you think. And this is, I finally brought the paper that tells you the grading policy. Not that I think very many of you need it, but now I can say I gave you the paper. So, all right. This is compliance. So, all right. Which method will make your malware smaller? Obviously packing, good. All right, what type of file do you have to execute using rundil32? Yeah, these questions are sort of like who's buried in Grant's tomb. Anyway, so, all right, which one gives you thousands of events per second? So you have to ignore most of them. All right, it's Process Monitor. Not Process Explorer, although not very many people fell for that. All right, good. And which one shows you individual Ethernet frames? Okay, that's Wireshark, of course. All right, so there are the winners. I do not have a blockchain for you today, but I'll make some more pretty soon. Emmanuel Tip, I know him. And Peter D. I think I know who that is. I think I know who all those people are, which is handy. So it's only half hour, so I can start demonstrating stuff. So let's take a look. I added a couple of extra credit bits to the projects that were already there, which is the projects 2 and 3. So let me just mention those. And then we'll talk about the dynamic analysis. Here's your static techniques where you see that analyze your malware with things like PE view and bin text and such. And at the bottom, I added another challenge. You had one where you're finding an important sum. Here's one where you have to find a date stamp. Just more practice using those tools. And here's the unpacker, where in this one you had to unpack this thing with the UPX unpacker to see the strings and such. And there's another one here packed with a different packer that you have to detect. So again, practicing with these tools, you'll find that you can do it. All right, but the new stuff is here, and this is good, clean fun. So let me run this back. Okay, basic dynamic analysis is here, and here we go. So let's bring this up. We're going to look at Labo 301 in the virtual machine here. So let's start, well, maybe won't bother, PE view. The thing about this is PE view tells you almost nothing. There's almost nothing in the import address table, so that's not very helpful. And strings has a few things in it, like a registry location and a URL and something called video driver. It's still not very much. You're not finding much in the strings, so it's appropriate to use dynamic analysis, which is what we're going to do. So let's launch Process Explorer, Wireshark, and Process Monitor. And in this thing, you can just type the name. So Process Explorer and Process Monitor. As I wrote batch files to launch these, and then Wireshark. All right. So I'm going to have all these things running, and I'm going to run the malware in a minute. So I'm going to open this malware folder and go to the binary collection and chapter 3, and there they are. Okay, so now go back to my instructions. Let's take a look at Process Explorer, Wireshark, and Procmon. All the harmless processes are, in fact, we're going to run labo301.exe. All right, so let's do that. So here is, let me turn this down a bit. All right, so here's Wireshark. Let's get it sniffing. In Wireshark, you see your connections down here, and you can just double-click the one that has traffic. Local area connection, this little bar here shows you that you have traffic on that connection. So that's the one. Double click it. Now my host machine wants permission because it's got to listen on my host machine as well. And now it's sniffing. All right. And there come the packets. So this thing is picking up traffic such as it is. Process Explorer doesn't require any more adjustment. It's running, showing me what's running. Now the way Process Explorer works, it's a really good way to learn how Windows works. So when your system boots up, it runs with system privileges and launches system and has, then it launches this thing. It launches WinInit and has a bunch of children. Children of a processor shifted to the right. So WinInit has all these children, and here's all those SBC host things. So this one is running remote procedure call. This one is running TCP/IP and DHCP and so on. You can see what they're all doing, which you do not get to see in Task Manager. And all these blue things are running as services. They are not providing any direct benefit to the user with the keyboard and the mouse. They're a service to help support other programs. Then, after Windows is all done starting up, it gives you winlogon.exe. That presents you with a logon prompt asking you for a name and password. And when you log in, now you launch explorer.exe, and that's blue because that's owned by you. And this is kernel land, mostly, and this is user land. So this stuff runs in ring 0 and it's full control of the processor, and all this stuff runs in ring 3 and is not able to directly touch the hardware. So if you want to send a packet out the network card from user land, you can't do it. All you can do is ask one of these services to please do it for you, and it has to use a pre-canned kernel routine that goes eventually to a device driver written by the manufacturer of the network card, and that runs in kernel land, which is why device drivers are dangerous and they cause the blue screen of death. And Microsoft keeps making more and more and more requirements on people that provide device drivers that they improve their code, because they get irritated with everyone going to Microsoft tech support and saying, why is my Windows broken, when it's not Microsoft code breaking it. So all this little bit of stuff down here is all the user land stuff, and there's not much, of course, because I haven't done anything. Some stupid Java thing is running. There's Process Explorer, here's Wireshark. I noticed that VMX32 to 64, meaning this malware has already been run in this machine, probably because I've demonstrated it before, so that's what I put this troubleshooting box for. If your machine has already run the malware once, you have to clean it off before you run it again. So, you have to first kill that process, VMX32 to 64, which you can do here, kill process, and then you have to delete this file. So let me delete this file. I can do it in a command prompt, is the easiest way. Del that file. Okay, now the malware will run again. So now I'm ready. I haven't got my third product running. My third product is Process Monitor. And here's all the stuff it's ignoring. It is already configured to ignore a whole bunch of processes with these names. Process Explorer, Auto Run, System, and so on. All these processes are ignored by name. So I say OK. Now it's running, and you can see the current filter excludes all 115,000 events. Thousands of events are happening, and it's storing them all, but it's not showing them to me. So now I'm ready to run the malware. And it's lab0301. So I run this thing, and it does things. So now I see it's made network traffic. It has made a couple of events here have occurred in Process Monitor, and Process Explorer shows that there's now this process running down here, lab0301.exe. So let's go to my instructions and see what fun things there are to notice here. It's created a mutant, which you can see in lab0301.exe. So lab0301 is here, and if you view lower pane view, here are the DILs that it uses. These are the library functions it uses. It doesn't show you the particular functions, it just shows you which library it's using. And you can also see the handles it makes with lower pane view. Handles are objects that have names in the memory. Things like a handle to a file. If you do C, you print to a file handle, you open a file and then you print to the handle. And the one thing here that's fun is mutants. Mutants are marks made in the memory which can be seen by other processes. Normally, each process runs in its own memory space and is different, separated from every other process, so they don't intrude on each other. But if you want one process to talk to another process, you create a mutant, and now they can both see it. And this malware makes a mutant with this name, WinVMX32, which is the clue that the malware is already on the machine. And that way, when you run the malware installer again, it notices that this machine is already infected and doesn't infect it again, and that's why I had to clean that junk off when rerunning the malware. And most malware does that. It won't infect the same box twice. All right.
Is that because it makes it more noticeable that it's infected?
I suppose it is. It's also just that, you don't need to. It's a common thing. I don't really know why they're always so careful, but they mostly are. I think probably the earlier generations of malware, it used to be maybe 10 years ago, malware would always mess up your machine and make it crash. And I think the malware developers decided to improve their professionalism to get out of that nonsense. That used to be one of the clues, was when your machine is slow and it crashes a lot, you're infected, although it's hard to tell that from a Windows machine running as usual. But anyway, especially lately. So anyway, you can view the DILs and see what DILs it uses, and you'll notice that it is using networking DILs, like WS232 and WS-TCP/IP. So that implies that this malware does use the network to make some kind of network traffic. And you can see that in Wireshark. So let's look at that next. If I go to my machine here and I look at Wireshark, let's stop this. Okay, so notice here, this is very nice because I'm running in a virtual machine in NAT mode. There's no other traffic. So you can see the whole story. First, I do a DNS query looking for practicalmalwareanalysis.com. My machine is connected to the real internet, so it gets a real response. Then it sends a SYN/SYNAC ACK, and then it sends some kind of data up there, which appears to be SSL to Wireshark because it went on port 443. And then that's it, and it will just do this over and over. Every 30 seconds, it sends a packet to practicalmalwareanalysis.com. So that is the command and control domain. And the data it sends, you can see by taking any of these TCP packets, right-click, and follow TCP stream. And this will show you what it sent, and this particular malware just sends 256 bytes of random junk, different every time. That real malware would send encrypted passwords, stolen data, responses to commands from the master in here, which might very well look like random data, but it would actually have a pattern. This fake malware, it's really just random. Anyway, that's the beacons. This is one way you catch malware. Most malware sends beacons home on some periodic basis to tell the control center, you've got a bot here and you can use it. And they have a master switch that says, I have 10,000 Windows machines, Windows 98 machines here and 20,000 Windows XP machines there, and I can issue them orders from my control panel. So the beacons are, of course, very useful indicators of compromise, because once you know what they are, you can just look on your network for those beacons and zero right in on which machines are infected. So that's high-value information. And here's more high-value information. Here in Process Monitor, that because I filtered out everything else, it zeroed right down and told me some really hot stuff. The malware wrote a file right there, WinVMX32-64 in that folder. So if I look for the presence of that file, that indicates an infection, and it wrote a registry key here in the run key. And this is very common persistence mechanism. This is called an auto start extensibility point. You can get a tool called auto runs from sysinternals to detect these. There are about 30 ways to make things automatically launch in Windows. And once malware gets on the machine, in order to attain persistence, it does this so that if you restart the machine, the malware restarts too. So this is a simple way to do it. You can put a shortcut in the startup folder, and of course the malicious authors look for the more and more confusing ways to do this. Hopefully you'll miss it. But these are another very good indicator of compromise, is the presence of that. All right, and I think that's all I expected you to see on this one. So that's the dynamic analysis of that one, and there's a couple of things you can put in here to get points. View your beacons, and then you can get the beacons out of a saved file I made and get points on that. So you just demonstrate that you've learned how to do those things. Yeah?
So when you submit the answers, how long does it take for it to update in Canvas?
It should update within like 2 or 3 seconds. It should update right away. The only thing that limits it is the speed of Canvas, and I'm using a free Canvas server, so it's a little bit slow. But it should update right away. If it takes any longer than that, then something's wrong. And I wrote all these scripts, so they're buggy, and if you find problems, let me know. They're better than they were in the first week of the semester. First week of the semester, a bunch of students couldn't update their scores at all. I found that and fixed it. So I think it's working now, but You'll let me know, I hope, if it's not, which is entirely possible. And then there's a keylogger, and this one is good, clean fun, and I think I can just go ahead with it. We're not up to an hour yet. So, this one is Lab 0303. So let me go here, and I don't need Process Monitor for this one. All I need is Process Explorer, and I don't need the lower pane view. Let's get rid of that. Okay. And this right here is pretty good. Let me go down here and then put the malware up here so I can see two things on the screen at once, and I'll be able, I'm good that most of you are in the room, because this works best if I zoom in, and the zoom I don't think works for the Zoom share, but it will work for the recording made in this room and for the people that are physically in the room. So it's pretty good. There are static images and instructions on the project for people who are not able to see this efficiently. So here's the point. I'm going to run Lab 0303, and I want you to watch what happens down here. Now that I've explained the general structure of Windows processes, this is user land, and every process has a parent and a child, and everything that belongs to the user is down here as a child of Explorer, and everything else is pretty much a child of Windows. So let's run this Lab 0304, right? Or is it 303? Okay, 303. Okay, a new green thing popped up here. That was a new process launching. Then it went red and killed itself. So Lab 0303 opened and killed itself and ended, and then it had a child called service host down here, which did not terminate when its parent died. Now all of that is really suspicious. Service host does not belong down here at all. It belongs up there. It should not be running under my user privileges. Everything should die when its parent dies. This is very weird, and that's the keylogger. The keylogger is running here, and it's monitoring all the user land processes and stealing all the key presses that go to any of them. So that's what it's doing, and you can see the action if you now type in something. So if I go to, say, Notepad, and I type in top secret stuff, okay, then you'll see there's a log in the same folder you launched it from called practicalmalwareanalysis.log, and that is stealing your key presses. Here's the top secret backspace stuff plus things left from earlier demonstrations. So that's the keylogger running, stealing it from anything in user land. And that's pretty cool. So that's the joy. This keylogger is one thing that's not going to survive the move to Server 2016 because it's using an old technique, which is not used by later versions of Windows. But anyway, we're probably the last generation of students that will get the joy of using this particular keylogger. But anyway, that's the game. Now let's look at process replacement. That SVC host service that's running is kind of fishy, and if you can use Process Explorer to see how fishy it is. If you go down here to that process, which is the keylogger, and go to its properties, they're here, and if you look here, you've got strings. Here's this, you can do strings right from here, and here's the strings of the image on the disk. And the image on the disk is the image of the Microsoft SVC host.exe, which is, of course, not malware, and it's harmless. But that is not what's running. It loaded SVC host and then ripped out the guts and put in different stuff for the guts. And if you look in the memory, the image on memory is completely different and has totally different libraries and everything. And this is the cute trick. You can launch an innocent program, then rip out the guts and put in malware. It continues to run. And that's why we didn't find the strings where we expected to, because what it did was save the guts to be used for process replacement as a data file, and then launched some kind of loader, which just launched SVC host, took the data file, and read it into RAM. It didn't store it in the usual way you'd expect it to store that data for a running file. So we didn't find the strings as usual. And that's the game here. Here's the file it's going to use to launch C Windows 32 SVC host. Launch that, rip out the guts and put in my guts, and now we're in business. Anyway, and you see another thing kind of goofy. You got sysinternals here, which doesn't really make any sense. Sysinternals is not, at this time, a Microsoft product. They bought it later. But anyway, that's process replacement, which is a handy trick. All right. And again, there's things to record to show it going. And then I made another file. It's another keylogger you can analyze, and you have to find out where it's putting your keystrokes. There's a lot of ways to do that. So that's the challenge. That's worth extra credit. I try to maintain the general philosophy that all you have to do to get the official points is follow the instructions. then the challenges require you to think of something more, and they're worth extra credit for that reason. That's the plan. And anyway, I think that's all I've got. That's the chapter and the projects you've got to do, so go ahead and do them, although none of them are due for a while. The ad date is still going, so nobody loses any points for anything until 9/11, but hopefully you're reading the chapters and taking the quizzes and already starting the projects. And if anybody wants to volunteer to open up the lab, let me know. I'm going to hopefully get some volunteers and a schedule up. I have a couple already, and I need a few more, and then I'll put a schedule on the door and on my website. Anything else? Go to the job fair, a week from today, I think. Yeah.
So I noticed that the quizzes are due today. I was looking at the Canvas and I was...
Right, so that's why people are still adding the online Canvas. That's why I have a star here. They're due today, but you don't really lose any points until later.
Okay.
Because it's unreasonable to really demand that you do them today, but I recommend doing them today. So yeah, if you can't do them yet, that's fine. There are people that might come to the next class to add, so that's why I used to not make anything due until after the ad date, and then I realized that's not really right because I recommend doing it sooner. That's why I'm taking a class in Canvas. If I used Canvas correctly, it would really guide you what to do every week. I'm pretty primitive at using Canvas because I got used to using my own website before these things existed, but I have to catch up. Anyway.
Canvas is mainly used for quizzes for the meantime?
It's quizzes, and it's also just your scores. All your scores are going in Canvas, but your projects aren't there. You do them here, and you fill out a form, and those points go right in Canvas. So I'm just using it as a grade book. I used to have my own primitive system from 20 years ago with Excel that would publish up spreadsheets, and I finally realized, I could just use Canvas, and then you can see your scores, and they're always up to date, and you're not seeing other students' scores, and it's a whole lot more professional and dignified. I'm slowly catching up.